Hey everyone, I'm here with Thrive Academy, a new school opening up in Houston. This is Jenny and Dr. Chris, and we are honestly just having a conversation about what Thrive is and the offering that it has for the Houston community. Thanks for meeting with me, guys.
Thank you for coming in.
Tell me what prompted the opening of Thrive. Tell me about, what was the catalyst?
So Dr. Chris and I used to work together, and we have been looking at mainstreaming our children for a while, and we noticed there is a big gap between where the special ed is in Houston and where mainstream is now in Houston.
Okay.
It's becoming a bigger gap, and what we wanted to do is we wanted to kind of bridge that gap for our kids and make it easier for them to access the mainstream curriculum, make it easier for them to advocate for themselves within a school setting and not be worried about it, but also know how to advocate for themselves in a way that teachers and administrators will listen.
Okay, and sort of how do you envision working with a child to help them begin to advocate for themselves? Because that's such an important aspect too. They've got to learn how to speak up for themselves. They've got to learn how to say, teacher, you're not giving me this accommodation that I need. I need more time for my test. You need to give me pictures of the notes. You need to give me whatever.
Yeah. And that's why
especially
it's great to have Chris on staff. He's able to work with the children individually, but also he's able to work with us as teachers. So how do we need to be receptive of when they talk to us? A lot of teachers, a lot of times in public schools, you've got a lot of kids in a class, and to just shout across a class of 23, 30 children, I need my notes, is not the way to put it. It
Right.
puts the teacher on the back foot. So it's just helping the kids when they say that they need something to just kind of say, okay, how can we do it this time? Make sure, or sometimes I'll forget to give them something. I'll say, oh, why didn't you tell me that you forgot to do that I forgot to do that, and making them aware that I forget things. Teachers are busy, they forget things, and it's okay to say, I need this.
Mm-hmm.
This is something I need and want. And then...
And I think the biggest thing, depending also on different ages, you have different goals. We start off by just even discussing if they're presenting with a diagnosis, even the children learning about themselves. And, well, why does this child not need the extra notes or extra time? And okay, so here's why this might be beneficial for you. And also very much, I agree with Ms. Jenny, where learning where the teachers are coming from in terms of, because a lot of our kids, especially when they're in bigger schools or more mainstream schools or public schools, there is a lot of anxiety about just approaching the teacher. They pick up on everything that in terms of the teacher is overwhelmed. The teacher doesn't want me to stay after class and ask for this thing, or the teacher doesn't want to come earlier. Well, yes, actually, if you do show that you're invested and you're willing to put in the time and you are following through or asking for help, the teacher will go to bat for you.
Yeah.
And if the worst case scenario is that they don't, here's how we figure out other resources.
And sometimes teachers just don't like you.
And that's true.
But
and
teachers are human.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
exactly.
we don't always get along, and it's the worst when that happens. And I always tell the kids, people are just of different personalities. It's got nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And I want the children, yes, you might be right. Teacher might actually really not like you, or might really just be a grumpy person, but at least I need you to know that you did everything you could, and this is not because of you. That you went and did everything you needed to do, you asked, you followed through, and because that hits them very much.
It does.
It isn't about me, it is about this other person, or whichever scenario in life,
Right.
even with friends.
Because a lot of kids just want approval, they start off just wanting the approval of their parents, and they enter school at such a young age, and they want the approval of their teachers and their peers and their administrators.
And we have kids who have been so beat down by that a lot of our job is just building up their self-esteem. That because they do want that approval, and they feel like it's something they did.
Right.
And it's understanding that it's not necessarily something they did, and it's something that they might have had absolutely no control over. You can't control other people, you can only control yourself.
You can't.
And making sure that they understand that sometimes it's a year-long process, if not more, building up the self-esteem, and you have to hold off the academic piece just for a couple weeks and work on that, because they can't access the curriculum if they're too scared to fail.
I agree. And and as a parent with a learning different child, what's interesting to me about what you just said is learning that you can't control somebody else's emotions is a very adult thing to learn. Yeah. It's usually something we figure out in our 20s and 30s. Usually we're in our 30s by the time we kind of master that sort of thing, but we have to teach our very young children while they're in their school years that this is something
and
that
they can make mistakes, and where they see how we respond, how they respond, and that they have multiple chances.
Right.
School is very hard for children. We are putting them in a position that we as grown-ups do not like. Every day they are learning something. Every day is new. Every day they have to follow this set routine, whether it works for them or not. And as grown-ups, we often have to take a step back and say, this is not something I would enjoy right now. This is not something, yes, education is so important, but we are not necessarily making it the best for the children. Right. And we have to understand that this is not necessarily something they enjoy. You can't, as a grown-up in an office, you get up and you can go to the toilet whenever you want. And that's not something you can do in school.
Right.
If you're hungry, you can get a snack. So we're constantly changing what kids can and cannot do, and just getting them to understand that and being able to see it from their perspective, because what looks like a child acting out is a child genuinely not understanding why they can't just get up or stand up and do their work. And that's a lot of we had an open house last night, and parents came to see the classrooms, and there was a table with no chairs, and they said, why are there no chairs? I said, some of my kids like to stand and write. And frankly, if you're writing, I don't care if you're sitting on the floor, I don't care if you're sitting on the chair, I don't care if you're kneeling. It's all about the output.
It is. And to hear you say that is so heartwarming for me, being, again, a parent of a learning needs child and within the public school system itself. He is a very kinesthetic learner. He is incapable of sitting still. But because he's incapable of sitting still, they're constantly looking at me saying, your child is ADHD. Well, in my particular, while ADHD has a high comorbidity rate with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and all of the learning differences that kids tend to have, in my child's particular instance, he does not have ADHD. But I am constantly going back and forth with the school going, you don't understand. If you look at him and say, sit down and be still and do this, he's going to sit there for about 10 to 15 minutes, and he's not going to take in a single word that you're saying, because what's going on in his head is going, sit still, sit still, sit still, sit still, sit still, until like that rabbit runs across his vision that distracts that thought process, and then he's back to doing whatever he does. So I have to write in accommodations that he can have a wiggle chair. He can get up and walk around the classroom as many times as he wants. He can go to the restroom as many times as he wants.
We still have to ask.
Right.
Let us know.
Actually, no, he doesn't.
And we have a lot of movement built into our curriculum because of that. Every single day we start with PE. We start with half an hour of PE, the physical exercise. They have to be outside. They have to be moving around. And what you get, the product you get in class afterwards is completely worth half hour of PE, because people will question it. They'll say, well, my child needs to be learning. And they do, but they learn so much better after they've run it all out. The more and more why kids aren't sitting still is because we're not giving them that chance to get out that energy. So we do have recess. We do have the time for them to get it out. If they need that break, if they need to walk around, that's important. Because the work that comes after that is so much more than you would have got if they were just sat still.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And we do it across elementary and middle school, whereas the elementary students might enjoy more physical activities. It's completely developmentally age appropriate for the middle schoolers. And they have to learn that too, where the way they use their time during recess is they walk around.
They walk
talk to
around
each other,
chatting.
They chat, or they're sitting down and just, they need to get used to that too. They don't
Right.
need to go, if they want to, they can play soccer or whatever they want to play. But what they're learning on a social level, just even how to hang out and wait their turn, actually listen to each other on a very basic level.
Which is so critical and what some of our kids really struggle with.
And they want to, especially if in the classroom they're not getting it out, or they want to, they have a million things on their mind that is interesting to them. They want to share it. They want to see what other people think. They want to be part of a conversation.
And
They do.
that's the way the layout of this classroom works, is everyone can see everyone, and that helps them with conversation. They can see who's talking, they can kind of see who wants to talk next, whereas you're in rows, it's very hard, especially if you're in the front row, to know that someone behind you wants to talk.
Right.
And you can't be part of a
Or how
conversation
they react.
if someone's behind you. This opens itself up to a whole class discussion. Kids feel more comfortable to talk in this sort of situation and environment.
And I'm such a huge fan of more of the Socratic method, which is what you're describing, versus the industrialized method, which is what school traditionally is. So yeah, I'm 100% with you. You're definitely doing the right thing.
And then lunch, we're planning on always having lunch all together, especially while we're still small and we have big space. We want, because we notice also our children, our students, when we're around, it's easy, they talk a lot, they want to share, they want to keep us updated, but also then if there's conflicts or there's conversations that are getting derailed, that we can still jump in and correct or redirect, and eventually also just step back and let them
But
do their thing.
it gives them a chance to talk to the teacher, to find that the teacher's human. And in school, if the teacher just is there during lessons, you don't know that person. And then from a teaching standpoint, it's interesting to listen to them talk about things they like and be able to bring that into the classroom. And so it works for both of us, and they love it when we sit and eat with them. They love coming to sit next to us and talking and telling us what they did, because a lot of the time in class there isn't time for that. So we have to make time for that so they feel comfortable with us, and they know that we want to learn about them, that we want to.
Well, it's so important too, because I mean, if you think about your own childhood, you know, the teachers that we've had in our lives were major figures in our lives. You know, they're up there with mom and dad, and their presence and their influence. And you know, I still remember, I don't remember her name, but I can still see my kindergarten teacher's face, because that was just, she was such an impactful person on my life. I can still remember my second grade teacher's face, because my mother hated her.
Exactly.
You remember the great and the bad.
I remember the great and the bad, you're right. But it was, you know, the teachers, when they're disconnected from the kids and or they don't understand what our kids are going through or how to teach.
Or the whole child even, in terms of just not the academic part, but okay, there's something that I can anchor to that sometimes it is difficult to, especially when it's a difficult day, seeing the positive. And it makes it easier when you have a connection with a child, or a child has a connection with an adult, that really, or the teacher, that really, okay, yes, they might have struggled with something that I've taught them 20 times and knew 2 minutes ago and now forgot, but hold on, there's all these million other things that I know about this child that are awesome, and this is what makes me want to help keep going.
And parents will email us pictures. We had a bunch of kids go into the Special Olympics and get medals, and they're like, "Can they show the medal?" I'm like, of course, that's awesome, that's amazing. And a lot of them will say that they know and they're interested in different sports because that's what we did in PE, and it gives them, again, that group. When they leave us, they find their friendship group that way, and it's important that they know what they're good at instead of always being told what's difficult for them. What they're not good at, but this is something I'm good at, and knowing this is where I'm going to find maybe my friendship group, but this is where I'm going to excel, and I want to put my time and effort into this as well. Instead of, you know, in a lot of schools, kids may enjoy science or social studies, and that's when they're being pulled out for extra help. And so they're not getting the chance to enjoy that. And so you're making it all about the one difficulty they have, and let's say it's dyslexia, let's say it's the reading component. But that does not mean you can't do science. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy social studies and learning about history. And that's where your reading's going to come in.
Mm-hmm.
If you love learning about history, that's where you're going to read.
Right.
My dad taught my sister how to read from football programs in England. We went to football every week, and she learned to read using the football program.
Mm-hmm.
And that was way harder than any books that we were given. It was way harder. But that's what she was interested in.
Right.
And parents say, you know, oh, I don't want my kid reading comics. Why?
Yeah.
Are they reading?
Exactly.
Are they enjoying it? Let's
Exactly.
go for it.
And there's so much evidence that shows that graphic novels can really help our learning struggling or our reading struggling kids, our dyslexic kids, because it does give them something specifically. Like take my son for instance, he loves Percy Jackson.
Yeah.
But because Percy Jackson
Yeah.
is now releasing their novels in graphic novel format, yes.
I do it with my kids. I love that book for my kids, especially with the ADHD aspect that's involved.
Yeah.
And that's like the superhero power.
Yeah, no, some family, you know, because you get to Christmas every year, you know, and your family's like, what do I give your kids, and what do they want? And I told a couple of them, I was like, I want iTunes gift cards, I want Amazon gift cards, and I want Percy Jackson graphic novels, and they were like, on it.
That just made me so happy.
So,
But even higher up, we using mouse as a way of that's not a comic.
right,
There's so much in that. There's so much art. There's so much involved within that. And I think a lot of that comes from schools and parents and past research.
right,
This was deemed inappropriate when I was a child.
yeah,
And so parents are worried about that. So, and they need to just understand that it's okay. And there's taking away that judgment piece from the parent standpoint, because a lot of parents are feeling very judged by how their child is doing at school, and it's nothing that you are doing.
yeah,
And this is how we're supporting your child. This is how you can support your child. There's that judgment piece that comes with having a child that's struggling in school is so difficult for the parents, and it has an impact on the child,
it does.
because then you're feeling the parent's anxiety as well as your own. And a lot of the times, a lot of what we do is work with the parents, and as they're feeling more relaxed, they're feeling more comfortable with the children being in our care, you see that come off the child as well.
Right,
They start to relax, they feel comfortable. And again, it doesn't matter how good an actor and actress you are, your kids feel it.
Oh, yeah.
I always say they're barometers for how we're feeling.
Oh.
They feel what we feel, whether we think we've hidden it.
I remember when my son was an infant, you know, and I would sit in his room holding him, getting ready to rock him to sleep, how, you know that zone where their eyes are sort of open, but they're drifting, and all you're sitting there and doing is rocking. And my mind would kind of start to race. And if I started going down a very anxiety-ridden path, he would start to wake up, and I could see the anxiety, my anxiety, come through him. And so it was such an eye-opening experience for me as a mother, especially a first-time mother, to sit there and go, my mental state and my emotional state really does have a very strong influence on my son, whether or not I think I'm expressing anything at all. How, and if I would clear my mind and go happy thoughts, happy thoughts, how he would start to calm back down again, and I could feel his breathing slow, and I could feel his heart slow, and I could feel him start to drift back off. I'm sitting there going, oh my cow.
It is, you don't realize it, and it's so important as a teacher it's not just, it is about the child, but you have to look at the whole child, their whole home life experience. How you help with all of that is so important to how the child is doing at school.
Okay.
And little things like they're not sleeping. They're just little things, and you get the parents on side and they'll tell you these things, and everything is just a lot easier for the kids when the parents and the teachers are working in sync. But when the parent trusts the teacher, that's when the child will start trusting the teacher. So we work a lot with the parents, and they're anxious. They don't want to see us coming towards them.
Right.
That is that anxiety piece of being at school and your teacher's coming to tell you off for something your child did, as if it's your fault.
Right.
And it's going
Been
out.
there.
It's going out to parents saying, "Oh my gosh, she had a great day today," and you watch them as you're walking up to the car in carpool. As you're walking up to them, like, oh, "Please not me, please not me." Oh no, she's coming to us.
Been there.
Making sure that it's always something positive as well. And if it is something negative, you don't want to be doing that in front of everyone else.
Yeah.
Like, it should be positive when they see the teacher coming towards them, like, "Great day. Oh my gosh, your kid did this. Oh my God, did you see that? Look at this." And they begin to relax. And
Yeah.
school has become a chore for a lot of our parents. They don't like that carpool line. They don't like the drop off or the pick up because they're like, "What happened now?
Mm-hmm.
What did they do?
Mm-hmm.
What am I about to be reprimanded for something that happened at school that my child did?"
Mm-hmm.
And it's getting them to that place where they feel comfortable to leave their kid at school.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not worried that they're going to get a phone call. They're not worried that that's going to happen. And that's huge for the parents as well, that they can go and have a life while their kids are at school.
You make me want to enroll.
I mean,
To logistically make this work in my life, just because.
I mean, the clearest evidence of that is when, for example, we had overnight activities or evening activities where maybe it was the first time the child has ever been at an event like that. And,
Yeah.
and we had even parents waiting in the parking lot thinking, we're going to get a call, we're going to get a call. And then
We'll say we don't care what happens, we're not phoning you.
Yeah.
It's fine.
And
It's
kind
fine.
of- and the more and more, and the other part is also the parents then trusting that they can reach out to other parents and connect with other families and talk about their own experiences, where a meeting that maybe goes 30 minutes ends up being a 2-hour meeting where parents are able to say, "Wow, I've had the same exact experience." And it is, because it is very, very isolating.
Yeah.
When
It
you're
is.
coming from a situation where you don't know where your child is going to be going to school in a few weeks, or when the day is that they're going to say, "You know what, we're done,"
Right.
or "We've tried everything." No. But yeah, the overnight experiences.
I have
that-
parents cry when they
Yeah.
send their kids off because they said, "We've never had our kid go away overnight. They've never, not grandparents, aunts and uncles, it's not something they felt
Sleepovers,
comfortable
yeah.
with." And so we do a Friday night social once a week for our kids.
Oh, once a month.
Once a month, sorry, yeah, sorry.
I was about to say once a
Oh,
week.
no.
Wow.
We do not.
Careful.
You don't have lives of your own, right?
I'll tell you, Saturday morning is hard. But, and it's really interesting because a lot of our kids are on medicine and they're not. Like, it's worn off by then. But some of our kids come dressed up to the hilt because that's
What they've seen
new
on
for
TV,
them.
what they've seen
They don't get
their
invited
friends.
out by their friends. They're not used to having that friendship group where friends will just say, "Hey, come over." And in middle school, that is when children are beginning to make their own sort of play dates, if you will. They're texting each other, they're trying to organize things, and they don't have that yet, depending on where they were at for school. So we'll have kids who've been friends because of Friday night socials.
Right.
And then they see that they can do that. And like Chris said, we've had parents sit in like the car park waiting for them to be called, "Go, have fun, have dinner." We're trying to get the parents to go out
Yeah.
together.
Right.
And then we invite alumni, and the reason we do that is also because a lot of them, once they transition, are very afraid or scared or anxious about losing connections. Well, if I don't see them every day, I'm not going to be friends with them anymore. And what they all see is, one, they're going to be okay at the next school, but two, also that if you put in the effort, you can stay in touch with your friends. You, in a few years after you leave middle school, you're going to be driving, so you're going to be you're going to have more freedom. But you're right, your parents aren't the ones making these connections anymore. They're not the ones setting up the play dates. But if you work on it, they come and tell us always, like, "I want to spend time with so." Well, guess what? So-and-so wants to spend time with you guys too, so reach out. Well, how do I do that? And it's us taking that step of, wow, we have to go even into the more basics of, you have their phone numbers, you have their address, figure out where they are in Houston.
Yeah.
But no.
So when you open, you're going to be, ideally you're going to be, I believe you said 1st through 8th grade.
Yes.
And then See, every time I move my camera this way, it goes really dark, and then you lighten up again.
I'm like,
I
do you
think-
want to just sit there?
I think so. 'Cause
Okay.
Chris is in perfect light.
Of course.
Of course.
So you're going to be 1st through 8th grade, and you
Yes.
do believe in mainstreaming.
Yes.
So talk to me about mainstreaming and how you envision that working. Oh, this is perfect.
Okay. So the goal is always for our kids to mainstream. Generally, high school is an easier place to mainstream children. You have the electives, you have different class periods, so kids aren't as aware that maybe you're getting an extra study hall, and we're helping them plan that. You know, they'll see that they can do all these different electives, and they're like, I want to do this, 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 and this, and it's like, okay, step back, let's see what we can handle.
Right.
Also, from a high school perspective, I feel like kids really need those groups. You get the theatre groups, you get the sports groups. We can't replicate that.
Right.
And so we don't want them to miss out on that.
Mhm.
That's where they really find who they are, and they really start enjoying school for their group of friends, and they're able to do that. It is harder in middle school, but it's still workable.
Mhm.
We always look towards transitioning to mainstream. We are making it so I personally don't believe in homework. So we don't have homework 1st through 6th, but we do have homework 7th, 8th, again, preparing them for high school. And it's more that time management skill. So if you have a test on Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you're going to have to study.
Right.
Not Thursday. And just helping them with that. So it's not
Mhm.
going to be huge amounts, but it's getting them prepared with that.
Right.
We have the locker banks that's going to be in Chris's room, and we have Chris there watching them, helping, because that is difficult for them. But getting used to, I have math next period, I should probably take my math book with me. Getting them used to that, but in that safe place where if they don't have their math book, it's a 10-second walk to get it.
Right.
So just completely always understanding that aspect. We're going to have standardized testing once a year. It's going to be the Iowa. You can opt out of it. Again, it's not something that we necessarily believe in, but it's something that we have to prepare our children for. So if we're saying you're
so
ready,
you're not using the scores for anything.
Other
You're
than-
simply
yeah.
using the test as a means of
Exactly.
Exactly.
And
this
especially
will be a part of your life.
Yes.
And
what's
especially
mainstream.
for the older kids, especially as they're coming closer and closer to transitioning, it is something that as much as they might need the experience, it is going to be part of their application
Right.
packet.
Yeah.
But one thing that we highlight is that this one score or these 2 scores is only one component of the whole pie that is you going out. It's the school being the right fit. It's the interview, which we prep them and they're not going to interview with us because they know us so well. We'll find somebody who doesn't know them and who's going to be more critical, because I want them also to see that there are things, as much as we love you, there are things that other people who don't know you might have
They misinterpret.
Yeah.
And just being able to present yourself and being confident in doing that you're not worried that to the point where they're judging you so much that you can't function. But
I know some adults who need
yeah,
that
no,
lesson.
absolutely, I can't stand that. But the testing in my class, so I'm teaching the elementary, and they love it. They have no idea they're being tested. It really is just a way of, and I tell them, I'm like, it's a way for me to see what we need to go over more in class. So I want you to do your best. I want you to get used to it, but it's not the be all and end all. I'm not
Right.
using these scores. And then in the afternoon, and we spread it out over a week. It's not like a day of testing. It is not, you have to sit still, you have to do all of that. They need a break. It's done on the computers for them. A lot of our kids that like transferring, they're getting all the answers wrong, even if they know them, because they can't. So it's on the computer. They can listen. We have the modifications, and we'll talk about the testing that we use to help with that.
Okay.
And we make sure that it's functional for them. They need to know how to do it. If you are not looking to mainstream your child in like 2nd, 3rd, 4th, you don't have to do it. You can opt out. If there are some kids who come undone with testing, and I was definitely one of them, and I used to have to take medicine to take a test.
Oh, wow.
So I completely get where they are, but I think that helps when I'm doing it with them because I know where they're coming from. And a lot of them, the parents will say, how did it go? And they're like, what? How did what go? They don't even know they're taking a test. And that's how it should be. It's one day in your life should not define the rest of the school year, who you are, but we can't say that you're ready to mainstream if we don't know that you can do homework, that you can't take a test in a situation, because then we're setting them up to fail. Then we're putting them right back into the situation they came from, where they can't be successful. So as much as it's something we're not necessarily that we like, we have to make sure that we're preparing them for where they're going. And if that's where they're going, that's what we have to match.
So talk to me about, I'm going to be one of your typical parents, I believe. You know, I have a learning different child. How would that, through the application process into evaluating my son and how you would work with him, talk to me about that. How would you, what curriculums would you use? How would you figure out what's best for him? Include in that, please, like the teacher to student ratio that you envision for your school. So
can we start?
So start with the application part.
So the application, I mean, it's online, of course, but it starts with a conversation over the phone and then inviting the family, the parents or guardians, to come just see the location and kind of get a sense of what they're looking for. Before, if there's psychoeducational testing available, because we're not just aiming to have, we want a class with diverse children, so children that might be presenting with learning differences and some that are presenting with some difficulties, but maybe not necessary diagnosis. But so as much as information as we can, we might even ask if we can talk to the current teachers, anyone that's working as part of the team of the student or the child, so that we can get a sense before even meeting them to kind of how are we a right fit. In terms of getting the child in after the meeting with the parents is, right now, well, now we have a location, and once school starts, is that we would want the students, regardless if they're elementary or middle school, to have shadow day or days. We know our kids, the first day might not present the way they, both in a positive and maybe not so positive way, the way they usually are a student. They might be at their best behavior, but then, you know what, let's see when we up the ante in terms of the amount of work, or now we want to get a sense of where they are academically and socially, and they will probably sometimes need more than one day, and that's absolutely fine.
And some of them need a tour before any of the kids are here. They need to see everything before they come in. They want to know where everything is. A lot of that's their anxiety, but some of the, especially if they have sensory issues, they like to see it all, touch it all before they come in, and so we accommodate that as well.
And we often, even when we're looking then at the next school that they're transitioning into, that we put that in as a recommendation, that if possible, even being part of a tour, being part of showing up at school and just looking at it from the outside, that kind of easing all those steps.
Or even us taking them on the tour. To start with, because they'll be different with us than they are with their parents. So.
And there was something else, but if you have something. In terms of, we might, let's say we're meeting the child and family, and there's some questions about what might be going on and how to best address a certain concern, and there is no testing. We might recommend and ask, but the reason also we encourage a lot of times for our children is to have psychoeducational testing is because when they're transitioning out or when they're taking entrance exams for the high school, they might need accommodations, and they will need proof. It doesn't just help that we say they need extra time or a reader or access to a laptop. They will need paperwork, so might as well get started with that process. And
then if you don't agree with it, you can challenge it in advance instead of being stuck.
So just for some of the people that would watch this, define psychoeducational testing.
So it would be IQ, so a WISC, Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, or Woodcock-Johnson for academic. But of course, we accept commensurate testing if they're using a different battery. That's absolutely fine. So mostly IQ and academic, just to see even the basic picture of And we're not going to say, oh, they have that number or that score. No, it's more just to see where are strengths, weaknesses, and that we might not be evident when we're meeting the child or when we're seeing challenges in the classroom.
And a lot of kids who are verbally gifted may have processing disorder that you don't notice because they're so verbal. And so sometimes it helps with that, and it's not that we're looking to judge your child, it's more, okay,
Yeah.
let's try it this way. And it might be something the teacher works out by themselves, but it's nice when you have that. So it's not a judgment, it's more, oh, we need to do this. That child's such a talker, I never thought that they might have problems understanding.
So to back up for a second and focus specifically on IQ testing. So
Okay.
So for me personally, within my own particular family, my son is dyslexic.
Mm.
So to date, I have yet to get a decent IQ score on him based on, and I've got evaluations coming out of my ears. I have yet to get a real reflection of what his IQ is, because of his dyslexia, the comprehension piece drags down his scores so significantly that I have been unable to find a person or or potentially an evaluator who will perform the right kind of test in order to give my husband and I an actual reasonable IQ score for our child, because based on the number that we're given, we're sitting here looking at our kid going, there's absolutely no way. So if you don't mind elaborating on that, just because that is such a challenge with some of our kids.
And I think it goes back to understanding what an IQ test is and what it isn't.
Right.
What is it telling us about a child and their true ability? And also, of course, we look at, there's a confidence interval in terms of a score here doesn't necessarily mean they come within a range. But in terms of when we look at the score or the scores, we're not ever looking, and you shouldn't ever look at an IQ score or any score in a vacuum just by itself. You have to look at it and the parents know it all the time, that this isn't my child, or on the test it looks like you can't read, and you just read all those books. Did you tell the evaluator that?
Right.
But so when you're looking at an assessment, it has to be something that you look at all the data points. The same way if I were to ask just a parent to tell me about their child, it's not going to be necessarily representative, because the teacher might be getting a whole different student and different abilities and different skills. So when we do look at the IQ score, it's not end all or nothing. It is just one piece of the data, and if it is about just who's evaluating and how they not interpret, there's only one way to interpret the scores, it is about, and I talk to parents about this all the time, one, I want you, when you receive the report, I want you to sit down and really talk about it so that you understand it. If you're not getting that service, come in, we will go through everything with you and talk about it and what it is and what it isn't, where we will
We've had testers phone us and go through with us
Awesome.
after the parents. So we'll say, call us, let us know, what can we do? Because again, that one number, you can't let it define your child. But to get to that number is interesting data. And it's important and it's helpful, but it's not your child. Your child is not a number on an IQ test. But again, being able to find, a lot of the time it's the discrepancies that help us help your child. It's not the number. It's like, wow, look at the difference in this score and this score. That means this.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking at. And that's why you get a whole report. You don't just get given a number.
Right.
And too often people are just looking at that number. It's that report that's going to be so important.
Right.
What are those discrepancies telling us?
Yeah, and the students ask about their numbers too, and I never share it, because I'm like, it means one thing, but it doesn't mean what you're going to interpret it as all or nothing.
Right.
And we have a regular parent ed on just psych testing, because it is about also advocating for your child into a world that is very hard to know what to ask for.
Correct.
So they might say, yeah, we give this testing, and as an educated parent, you say, well, hold on, that's outdated testing, and I know based on this and this that it doesn't capture the strengths or weaknesses that might be, it won't represent my child, or children in general. If it's outdated, if it's not being used, or if the normative data isn't appropriate, don't touch that.
And that's why it's so helpful having him, because he can
And
look through
I've
it.
had parents go like, "Is this okay?" I'm like,
So I want to come back at some point and you and I just
Yeah,
talk
that's what I
about
said.
all
You
that.
need to. I said you need to interview him. by himself.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so we do provide that because that's we can give referrals, of course, but I want to make sure that parents are going in with all the tools because they get 45 minutes. And they often get told what they're going to be doing versus feeling empowered to say, you know what, that's great and all, but can you also look at these things that I've noticed? Because
Well, even asking for testing over 2 days.
yeah, oh yeah, even
You know, things like that you think you can't ask for, but again, your child with anxiety is
Right.
not going to perform one-on-one the first
Correct.
time, and the examiner will say that they. What's that term when they're just like, oh yeah, they were here.
I don't know. Sorry.
But I mean, but you're absolutely right, because I actually know a very specific example of a child that I know who went in to be evaluated. And within an hour and a half, the evaluator shut the whole thing down because he was so overridden with anxiety that, she walked out and told the parents, she went, "This is not going to work today."
And that's great that she noticed.
Oh, she said it in a nice way. And I
She
hope-
no,
I
she
believe
did,
it.
and she was like, we need to try to do this
Yeah.
on a different day, and she even gave the parents suggestions, sort of what to do the night before or what to kind of do the morning of, so that this particular little boy wasn't
Oh yeah.
walking in there just with his
Yeah.
blood pressure through the ceiling, just going, what is happening to me?
And especially if they're not able to communicate it
Right.
or even identify with themselves, we see it days leading up to it because the parents tell us, oh, in 2 weeks there's going to be testing, they're going to be out of school. We see it leading up where, okay, I'm not telling you what the test questions are, but the experience is you're going to be sitting at a table. If you need a break, there's some tests where you can take a break and some not, but ask. They
Right.
can always tell you. The biggest one is just try your best. There's literally, and they better tell you that too, there's no right or wrong. Try your best. We just want to see you at your best, and then this is going to help us inform. It's not going to tell us, ooh, bye. It's going to inform us, okay, so here are the things that are working really well that we're doing, and here are the things that we need to up our game.
But then even from the admission standpoint, it will show us maybe this class isn't right for this child, maybe it's this class. And again, we want to keep that mix because you don't want a group of children who are all overly anxious in a classroom, because then they're feeding on that within each other, and it's not the best place for them. We want to make sure when a child comes here, it's the best place for them, that this is what is right for them. And a lot of what we've been doing is going out, meeting other schools, talking to them, being able to say, we're not sure this is right for you now, maybe try this.
Okay.
Try this first. Your school said maybe you should stay with them another year. Listen to what they're saying and then come back. It's not about trying to get kids to come in, trying to fill up a school. It's about making sure that the kids that are here are happy and successful and are able to do what they need to do. And there is a year that maybe your child would fit in, and maybe there's a year that they wouldn't. And it's being honest with the parents, because putting a child in a position where they're not going to be successful, that doesn't help anyone.
Right.
And it's hard for me as a teacher, because as a teacher I'm like, I know I can work with that kid. But you don't want to end up with a class where no one's learning, where you change that dynamic and it's not right for the children. So that's another reason why we do the shadow day. Who did they make friends with? Who did they connect with, especially for the next year? Oh, this would be a good fit for them.
Yeah.
And we want to keep the class ratios small. We want to keep, we're starting with 1 to 10, potentially moving up 1 to 12, because that is a slightly higher number for kids going into mainstream, but it's not the be all and end all, because some years with a group, it might just be there's 8 in that class and that's what they need.
And when you say 1 to 10 to 1 to 12, you mean the teacher to
One
student
teacher
ratio? Right.
Within the elementary school, there will be a TA.
Okay.
Because how I love to teach is having that mixed grade classrooms. I think it's great for the younger kids to see what the older kids can do, for the older kids to be the role models. But from an elementary standpoint, that's hard. And
and I recently read an article, I believe it was last week, and I will try to find the source and I will send it to you. But it was talking about, and it was specifically about an open school where you did have a mix of grades in order to have that positive influence from the older kids, as well as it sort of gave them the opportunity to mentor the younger children and to say,
and they say that's how
been
you
there,
learn.
done that.
It's how you learn. If you can teach it, you've mastered it.
But it also allowed the children to not be, okay, you're 8 years old, you must be in second grade, and these are the specific classes that you're going to learn. It was more about, well, you might be 10, but maybe it's second grade math, or, you know, you might be 8 and it might be 10th grade, or I'm sorry, not 10th grade, but, you know, 8th grade math. But
no, absolutely. And they're not aware of their grades. When they're in my room especially, it's Miss Jenny's room. It could be anything. And, you know, and again with that, when you have the child who maybe in reading is on second grade level, but in math is on a 4th grade level, you have all those materials there, you have everything there for you, and it's great to be able to do it, and you're not being pulled out and taken into a different class. But when we're reading our books, you're able to get so much from some of the kids, and sometimes it's the younger kids giving it out, and the older kids like, oh, I need to step my game up. And sometimes, you know, it's the older kids mentoring them. It's harder from a teaching standpoint. You know, I can't read the same book every year, but that's great. I constantly have to be learning, and I have to be out there and looking at what's best for the class that I have, so it stops teachers sort of resting on their laurels as well.
Right. Talk about curriculum development for an individual child.
So I'm glad you said it that way, because a lot of people are like, what curriculum are you using? And it's like, it depends on the child. It really does.
Right.
We're really working hard to make sure that it's based around the child. But if you look at it from, let's start with language, we'll read a class novel. And a lot of that is the reading aloud part's very important. If they don't want to, and I'll have kids that don't want to, and they won't, and they listen. Where I'm coming from there is some kids maybe aren't as good at reading aloud, but they've got that understanding piece.
Right.
And so they should not be reading something too easy for them. They're going to be bored, they're going to stop reading. So they're listening to the other kids read, and they're able to give all that comprehension piece. Whereas you have some other kids who are just fluent decoders, cannot understand what they've just read, and they're being exposed to the comprehension piece, and you're working together. But that can't be the whole class. So we also do guided reading, and that's where we kind of meet them where they are. And we'll use a variety of different curriculum and different approaches depending on where they are, because yes, I still need to work on that decoding aspect, and I still need to work on that comprehension aspect explicitly with these children.
Can you name some of the methodologies specifically that you would be pulling from?
I really like NIHOUSE.
Okay.
I love the NIHOUSE approach. One of the things that I find, though, they like to start at the beginning, and so that's fine in an elementary classroom.
Right.
It is very depressing in a middle school classroom. You do not want to have to go back to a apple app.
Right.
And so I will change it. I'm a big fan of pulling different things and working them together, because we're in school and we can make it different. And a lot of children, I found actually that I really love the breaking down the vowel rules and all of that, and then all of a sudden you have the kids that over conform to that and cannot just look at a word and read the word. So other times I'll stop and I'll use the whole word approach, and it's looking at the pattern of the word, the shape of the word, and just memorizing words. The high frequency words are a good example, but sometimes with certain kids I have to tell them, like, stop sounding it out. Let's recognize these words, let's look at the page, let's look at what we've got, because they've overconformed, and then it's holding them down so much. So we used both. They need to know the blends, they need to know their digraphs, they need to know all of that, but we also have to look at the whole word, and so that's why I often need to pull from the different curriculums. I like WordWorks, I like Stevenson, and I actually use some of the dyslexia programs from England, bringing some of that in, and where we actually color code the different digraphs just to help them so they know what they look like. It's all just different, what works for them. And
Structured word inquiry at all? Or?
we do that.
Okay.
It depends. I haven't actually for a while with my kids. And a lot of the time the kids have had that so much, they've stopped reading. They see it and they're breaking down all the words and they're doing all of that, and it's like,
speaking from personal experience, I think part of it is that they develop these crutches.
Yes.
And it's very difficult for them to emotionally leave the crutch, but they also don't recognize that they have the crutch, and so it's an intuitive leap that, and I'm speaking from personal experience right now. It's working with them to try to make them make that intuitive leap that they're terrified to make, and they don't recognize that they're terrified to make that leap and go to the next level.
They'd
but also,
rather do that, sound it out, than be wrong.
Correct. And then sometimes it's figuring out that it is a crutch, but there's a piece missing to enable them to make that intuitive leap. And how, what is that piece that's missing so that they can go from doing simple 2-syllable words that they've phonetically taken apart to, doing the complex 3-syllable and 4-syllable words, which once you master those two things, you've conquered the English language pretty much as a whole.
Yeah.
So,
and actually one of the best ways that I've done it is actually through a spelling program. And it's the AVKO spelling program that I mentioned, audio visual kinesthetic.
Okay.
And we have a spelling test every day.
Okay.
So it's not, you have to memorize these words because that's absolutely pointless. I'll call out a word and the kids have to tell me the sound, the main sound within a word. Then they have to tell me the ending, and then they tell me the beginning.
Okay.
So it's breaking words apart completely differently to how they used to. They used to starting at the beginning, go to the middle, go to the end. It's all about finding that main sound. And then the first day is the word, let's say, I'm trying to think. Like literally forgotten all the spelling words. The next day you make it plural, so you add the S.
Gotcha.
The day after it's past tense, it's ED, and then the fourth day is ING. My kids start learning that you have to double the letter because it was a short vowel. They have learned when they have to drop the E to add ING. And it's all of that constantly that they then start recognizing in their reading. And we do it every day for 15 minutes. And then we have contractions in there. So what is a contraction? Going over, hey guys, this is a compound word. There's so much grammar involved, but all we're doing is calling out the word. And we're calling out the word big. What's the sound? Ig. How do you spell it? IG. What comes at the end? Nothing. What comes at the beginning? B. And then they go around.
Right. And obviously you can have other disorders which impacts their ability to be able to process certain
Exactly. And
things.
it's one of the best spelling programs I've ever used.
Okay.
And from someone who cannot spell, it's great. The only problem my kids have is my accent. So my TA has started teaching spelling while I'm in there because I'll say a word and I'm like, what?
schedule.
Well, the worst is that it's can't. That's the one where they're like, I'm like, what's the sound? They're like, aren't. it's those words. I'm like, Devon, how do you say this? So she started having to say the sound. Because they all looked at me, they're like, what?
I love that.
Branch. It's branch, branches, branching, branched.
What's the sound?
They're like, arch.
Well, and just the difference between our cultures and how we spell certain
Yes,
words.
exactly.
Having worked for a Scottish company for a brief time in my career, I would send emails and they would come back to me and they go, I hate the way you Americans spell words.
The Z and the like organizing.
Yes.
Oh yeah, when you said Z, and then
yeah.
the kids are like,
Yeah,
what
that's
letter?
not an S, that's a Z. And I'm like, no, it's not.
So that was really helpful. And then again, like the kids seeing that, I'm like, this is not something I can do. Like, they're like, really? Yeah, let's have Miss Devon do it. And that's huge for them in class. Like, Miss Jenny can't say branch. Like, it sounds weird. I just can't.
That's a good try though.
I know. I'm getting used to it. And so those sort of things where I'm like, this is just completely different and new for me. And them seeing that and seeing myself and Miss Devon joke and laugh about it, that it's okay to be different. It's okay. And wow, they find it funny.
Well,
So-
and, you know, then you're in a part of the country where, you know, we have some very unique ways.
we
to
do. I know. One of the best ever was this poor little girl, and she was she'd broken her leg and she was in a wheelchair, and she's like, Miss Jenny, I need to make. And I'm like, make what? And she's like, I don't want to tell you. And I'm like, but I don't know what's happening. And she was crying, and I did not realize she needed the toilet. And I had no idea. And I'm like, what do you want to make?
It's amazing.
I can
Let's work on it.
help. Like, and she was so upset because she didn't want to tell. And she thought I meant, like, what does she want to do in the toilet?
Southern manners, yeah.
She was freaking out because she couldn't just wheel herself to the
Right.
bathroom. And one of the kids was like, she needs to go to the bathroom. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And it was mortifying because she was so upset. And I had no idea what she wanted to. I'm like, what are we making? Like,
Right.
what do you need? I can get it for you. And it's like little things like that that you just completely forget. And this poor little girl was in tears.
Yeah, good Southern manners are in that little girl's house, I can tell you right now.
Make what, baby?
I would have been helpful.
She couldn't.
I
She
would've-
had, and she was like, "Why does this woman want to know what I want to do in the bar?" So it's all that like I'm trying to overcome, and it's kind of funny. The kids find it hysterical. They're like, "Okay, let's go out for this," and then when I go back home to England, I'm like, "Okay, everyone, it's time for recess."
Yeah.
Like, what?
So what do you look for in the teachers that you hire?
We want the experience with special ed. Even though we're geared towards mainstream, I think it's so important that they have that background in special ed so they know the difficulties that the children have and that they're used to dealing with it.
Okay.
Our teachers they're certified teachers, but they don't let anything bother them.
Okay.
When a kid is kids upset, they're like, it's okay, let's try it this way. They're used to planning a lesson and then scrapping it and starting all over. You have to be flexible to teach our kids.
Right.
You cannot say, this was in my lesson plan, this is what I'm going to teach regardless, and just plow on through a lesson. And a lot of that is how the ISDs work, and it's how public school works, because that's how it has to work. And so we need the teachers who are special ed trained and can handle this, but are working towards the mainstream. So we're coming from that special ed background so that we can support, and then working towards the mainstream.
Are you encouraging trainings like CULTS or the NIHOUSE program specifically?
So a lot of the trainings that we do are based on the children that we have.
Okay.
So we look at what we have and what we feel that we need. I'm very into teachers picking what they want to do as training.
Okay.
I mean, with direction, if they need the NIHOUSE training, that's what they're going to get. But, teachers saying, you know what, I really, last year, we all decided we wanted to learn about the Stevenson program. Is that going to help our kids? And I think that's important to have the teacher that really wants to use that program and is excited about that program is so much more than me just giving you a program. But also the parents will say, hey, have you heard of this program? And being able to say no. And looking it up and going on the trainings. There's so many webinars that we can do. I've had parents come in and give teacher eds on their student. This is my child. This is what you need to know about my child. And the teachers come in early because they want to know about the child.
Okay. So you've talked about special ed. You've mentioned sensory processing. You've mentioned dyslexia. What sort of learning issues do you envision really servicing here at Thrive? And you did mention too, Dr. Chris, about they don't even necessarily have to have a learning issue. It could just be an inability to work within a mainstream environment.
Yeah, and for us, in terms of some students we have that are presenting with just learning differences and associated anxiety or psychological symptoms in terms of depression or mood disorders that are impacting each other, or the experience at home, at school. We have students that really would benefit from sometimes just being in a smaller setting. They might not have a diagnosis, but might have issues within the classroom that make it very difficult to feel confident, to feel successful in a mainstream school. And it is, like you said a little bit earlier, it is about, for some kids, it is about just rebuilding a love of learning. And it is about that, and then getting them ready so that whatever's the next step, and we always talk openly about transitioning. It's never a taboo word in terms of if a parent wants to start a discussion or if we want to, because a lot of times our parents come in and this is the first time they can breathe and
They're
feel
afraid to go back.
yeah, and that is a whole step that we take where as much as we love our kids, and we always jokingly say, yeah, we gotta, and it is about, and it's not that we're rejecting the child or sending the family out to the wolves. It is, that's why we also started transition program 2 years back from what they're envisioning to get them through all the stages in a way that they feel confident. That we're not just rushing them through something that they're no way ready or confident in doing.
No, they're not doing it by themselves. And
Right.
that's where a lot of the mistakes get made, because they get anxious again and they're like, oh, we have to do it, we can't tell anyone, and you're going on a school visit. Don't do it behind our backs. Let us prep them for the school
Right.
visit. This is what it's going to look like. A lot of our kids a class of 30 is too much. It's overwhelming. There's nothing wrong with that. It's too much for them. The rigors of the mainstream school is too much. Some of them, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dysgraphia, and a lot, like you said, a lot of them come together. And you can be overwhelmed with the diagnosis, but sometimes your child would just be happier in a smaller place. And unfortunately, a lot of kids now are getting depressed at school. And
Depression, anxiety,
yeah,
PTSD.
all of that. We are seeing so much more of that
Yes.
than I never knew that a child in 3rd grade could be hospitalized for depression. Honestly, you just think these kids should be happy, healthy kids that are running around. And a lot of that, they just need that space to be happy and confident. And that's all they need.
Because they should be. They should
Yes.
be happy children. I mean,
Yes, they
you
should
know,
be outside playing football and riding their bikes. And
Absolutely.
they should not be that depressed, that anxious about going to school. And some of these schools, and they're put in the position, the schools are in this awful position, because now you have the mainstream, the private schools that are going a grade ahead, so the really good public schools want to be a grade ahead, and now some of the private schools like, well, we need to be 2 grades ahead. And hello, that's what grade level is all about.
Right.
That's why it's called grade level. And you're pushing these kids, and their failures, if they're not a grade level above where they need to be, well, why?
Right.
And so that's why we're not specific about diagnoses, because it might just be that they just work best on grade level, which completely makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, so many of these diagnoses are, it's such an unfair thing for childhood.
Yes.
I mean, I know from my family's perspective, we diagnosed my son he hit the wall at 7 years old. He was barely 7 when he hit the wall. We got a diagnosis a few months later, and we've been working very hard on private tutoring and remediation since then, and he looks at me from time to time. He's like, I just want to go outside and play with my friends. And I'm going, and I want you to go outside and play with your friends too, but you need to learn how to read.
Yes. And you don't want to be different in school, and you don't want to be different outside of school. Right. And it's this balance that parents are trying to strike, and it's very difficult.
It is very challenging. You're right.
And talking about even life outside of school, what we've noticed, and I've noticed it the last couple of times, because the siblings have been very much present as we're building this.
That's so
are the parents that are working with us, which are amazing.
Yeah.
But they have to bring everybody to these meetings
Right.
and have them out there. But it is really where I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, this has taken up the whole family's time. This diagnosis has affected everybody, and the siblings, they need a lot of times supports too. Not maybe related to diagnosis, but also just, okay, what does it mean that your brother or sister is presenting differently, and this is why mom or dad has to drive 1 hour or 2 hours out of your way to get to this specialist, or why is there someone always coming into the house to help with this?
Right.
Kind of, and also.
And don't tease that you can read and they can't.
Yeah.
When the
Or they're
younger
doing
sibling
this
is reading
Yeah.
higher level than the older sibling,
Oh,
that's
gosh,
really hard.
yes.
That's so hard.
It is.
It's a lot easier when.
Not that I know
Yeah.
personally,
Yeah.
but I mean, many of my friends
Yeah.
have multiple children where one is I mean, I know I keep mentioning dyslexia specifically, but, you know, or one is dyslexic and the other one's perfectly normative, and it's like, and they're younger.
Yeah, and it is hard. It can be a lot easier when they're older, and there's different problems as well. But it's just, you know, you have parents that are like, I don't want them to read in front of my other child, and it's like you have to also, and that's part of working with the family. You have to encourage your other children as well.
Yeah.
And that's, we want them to be that group. We have those like family times.
So important.
Oh, yeah. No.
That's why we do try and invite the siblings, we try and invite the whole family, so it's not once again
Right.
something that we're doing for your brother or your sister.
And going back also to admissions process, especially in the summer, maybe this year we squeezed in a summer camp, but we'll, in the future, leading into the fall, if we haven't met the child yet, or we've met them, interviewed them, everything, we will require and highly recommend, we'll require that they at least come for a week in the summer camp, just so that they get used. One, we get to see them in a different context, but also they get used to kind of, if they've been homeschooled because because it was an emergency where they had to pull them out, or, you know, that they come and see what it's like.
But even just, this is where the bathrooms are, this is where your classroom is, this is some of the other
And it gives us a chance to plan
children.
too.
And then from our point of view, we're like, oh, this curriculum would work very well for this child. So everyone's learning about each other, and some of our kids, they don't want to leave their other school, even though they've been picked on and they've been teased, they've been made to feel like it's their fault and they've failed.
Yeah.
So it's getting them to understand that this is actually fun and this is exciting and it's not a failure on them.
Well, it's like you and I were also talking about earlier about, you know, it will seem like a very small incident that sort of sends a child over the edge, but it's
when a teacher is constantly picking up like the little things, like, oh, I guess you need this, oh, I guess you need to do that, everyone wait because this child's not finished, I guess we can't go on to the next thing because everyone's finished. It gives the other children the belief that they can start saying that because the teacher is the role model in the classroom, and if they're doing it, then it's obviously fine. And they'll start picking, and it's little things like that that make the child feel worthless in school and that they failed. But the way we're training children, they're trained to feel like it's their fault, but they want to stay in that situation because they want to do better, they want to succeed, they want to show that they can do it. And we've had kids who have just snapped, where, and nothing bad, like just walked off, just left the school, nothing hugely bad, but it's, or God forbid, they have ended up in hospital with depression. And they're just, it's that thing where it's just this constant underlying, oh, that kid, oh, I guess we can't do that because he didn't finish, or she's not ready yet. And I was always that kid that was not ready yet. Getting dressed from swimming, we used to have swim practice, I'm dyspraxic, I was taken out the pool 10 minutes earlier because I couldn't find all my stuff. I could not do it. And I was of an age where I should be able to do it. And I just had phenomenal teachers. And I still remember to this day, one day, and they pulled me out the pool 10 minutes earlier, but I was ready first and the whole class was like, yay! And it was done, like, so it can be done in a nice way. It's when it's the constant, I was set up to succeed. But when it's the constant, everyone's waiting around for 10 minutes for you to be ready, and they're like, well, I guess we can't start this. So it's the way the teacher does it.
Right. No,
No, true story.
I'm with you. No, I'm completely with you. I mean,
always came home without a sock or shoot, like, swimming was not my favorite day. I love swimming.
Oh my gosh. But I mean, it's the executive functioning issues, you know, that all of our kids are having to cope with, whether they're dyslexic or dyspraxic or ADHD or whatever. I love that y'all, you know, are trying to teach them how to use agendas and locker combinations. And I mean, because our kids really struggle with locker combinations. And
even, it's a beautiful space, but what we instill in all of them is we haven't touched upon everything, is just they're responsible for the space. They're responsible for cleaning up. They're responsible for, it's their home. We're sharing it, but it's their home. They had their things will be up
It's
there.
taking pride in what you do and
Yeah.
pride in where you are, and that does build up your self-esteem.
And the volunteering component is, as much as you might have a learning difference and life might be very difficult for you, let me show you the world and show you that there's a lot of situations and lives, children your age, children older, that are experiencing different kinds of hardships, and how you can be helpful, how you can be empowered, how you, even though you might have this thing that you might struggle in. And that's why I tell the kids, you never say, I'm dyslexic, or I'm ADHD. I have ADHD. It's not the only thing.
It's not the thing that defines you.
Exactly. And the same way that
It's not your box.
exactly. And we want them to be out in the community, helping out, volunteering at kids' meal, at the food bank, at
Right.
animal shelter, at the park, cleaning up.
Right.
That they see, okay, one, I can play a role, but also life for other people sometimes is just as
Right.
difficult.
And we try in the elementary school to keep it very much based at the kids level, so that they understand that it's other kids, and
Yeah.
so it's more relevant to them.
Right.
The middle schoolers will choose more what they want to do, and that's getting them to think, where can I help? Where is there a need in the community?
Right.
But for our younger kids, getting them to understand that there are other children with other issues.
Well, and, it's so powerful that you said that, Chris, because I completely agree with that. They need to understand that it's an aspect of their
Oh, yeah.
character. Just like you're tall, that's an aspect of your character. It's
That's
not your
the
defining
The
characteristic.
kids think it's a defining thing.
But it's making them
Yeah.
understand, like being tall or being short or whatever, that character. It's a characteristic of
I
who
was
they
shocked
are.
when I
It's
say
not-
there were times where I wished I was a little bit shorter, because clothes,
Yeah.
the choice, they freak out when they hear, oh, there's some roller coasters I'm not allowed to go to because they can't keep me safe in it because I will hit myself.
It's the
Interesting.
total opposite.
Yeah. So that's why we don't do anything with children. They go on their own rights. But no, yeah. And that's why also when we talk about advocacy, the first step that we do is just teaching them, what does it even mean if you have dyslexia or ADHD? And they go like, wow, yeah, that is me, but I'm not that. I don't have that.
Right.
Or whatever they might have been called.
Yeah.
That the biggest thing is, this has nothing to do with your intelligence. You're not quote unquote stupid, or that's the one. I mean, we don't accept all curse words or any curse words, but stupid is, I mean,
Yeah.
that's.
No, that's a curse word in my house.
But yeah, that's why we wanted to start off by just knowing, okay, learn about yourself. What is
Right.
going on, and why is it that you might benefit from having more time or having a laptop? Well, they're all going to have laptops. They have to learn keyboarding. When we talk about transition, sorry, I'm talking a lot.
No,
When they go off into high schools, we figure out what they're going into with way enough time so that we can prepare them. So if we find out a school isn't at the point where they're all using laptops, or they're unable to accommodate that, we change gears. We go back into, remember that handwriting? So we created a writing group where they get pulled out after they're done with their work, and they are excited, because I got a call yesterday where the student was in 9th grade was saying, thank you so much for doing that, because we're writing everything and these paragraphs are long, but they just need to learn. They were going to school where it was all
Right.
still handwriting.
Well, and, every school district's doing things differently.
Yeah.
And, based on what you're saying, I'm also drawing the conclusion on my own, which is you're helping the parents help define those accommodations
Yeah.
that they're going to need with the mainstream school that they go to.
And what's just icing. Like, so what does your child need? What are you going to battle for?
So, because we are in Texas, and
Mhm.
with everything that's going on with the state of Texas right now, with the DOE calling out the TEA, DOE being the Federal Department of Education, calling out the TEA, the Texas Education Agency, and their 14-page censure,
It's long.
which every single page specifically called out dyslexia. So then you have the difference between a 504 and an IEP, where an IEP is services and accommodations and a 504 is purely accommodations. Are you trying to help parents navigate that road as well of what they need to fight for?
Yes.
Exactly.
Depending upon what school they're going to, whether they
Exactly.
go to public or I'm
lot
sure
of our
some are
kids-
mainstreaming into the other private schools in
Yes.
town.
A lot of our kids go to private mainly because it's smaller class settings where
Right.
they tend to do better.
Okay.
So we have kids go to public schools and we help them with that. But for parents and for the kids, it's generally easier in the private schools for them. It's a smaller class size. We have found them to be very receptive of what accommodations our kids need, and that's important. That even if you are fighting for something, when it becomes such a big deal that you feel like your child's going to be penalized because of it, it becomes a problem, and you have to reassess. And yes, you have to fight for your child at every step of the way, but you also need to make sure that you're not being put in that situation where your child is that child. So, but it's navigating all that language is so much, and we do the parent eds about that where we really break it down for them and what this means. And a lot of the times, our kids can still get their service plans through Spring Branch. They can get their testing done through them, and we go to those meetings
Okay.
and say, no, this is what needs to happen.
So you're functioning as an advocate.
Yes, and but if it becomes, for example, a larger scale issue in terms of where they need more a real advocate, so not necessarily a lawyer, but somebody who knows the ins and outs and has connections within the
Right.
school system.
And we've worked
that
with
can-
advocates before to help, where it's sometimes just the way it is that's what parents need. But
I've
telling
hired an
parents
advocate,
they,
so
but
I get
telling
it.
parents they have
Yeah.
the right to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Some parents don't know that, and
Absolutely.
they get given nothing because they don't know that they have the right to go back. They get presented with the testing. This is what your child is covered for, and they think, I have to accept that. I have to sign this, otherwise they won't get this. They'll take all of it away from me.
That's one of the biggest
Yeah.
messages that I try to communicate to the parents that I work with is I'm like, we are raised to believe
Yeah.
that school is a very sacrosanct thing, and our teachers and our school administrators are this untouchable, perfect creature. But you need to flip that on its ear as a parent, especially as a parent with a special needs child, is you can't go in there believing that. You have to go in there as 100% the advocate for your child and go, no, here's my questions, you need to give me answers, I want more information, I require this, that, and the other, and this is what's going to happen. What I try to do is work with parents going, you are the parent, they are just the school.
And you might even have to switch your role where you're not just parent, you are there fighting on, again, like a parent, you're fighting
Right.
there on their behalf. And we say even with I have older students that I work with outside of school where I even say, you know what, you are at a point where you can also advocate, and they are coming up with all these plans, but you're sitting there like, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to be there.
Yes.
I'm raising my hand to go to the front, or I don't want to sit next to a teacher,
Or even the extra time, when I was given extra time, and I was like, oh, I don't want it.
or
And it's not that, it's really hard when everyone gets out of a test and walks out and you are the loser sat there still with your test, and my mom had to force me to take it. And she would yell at me if I came out before my extra time was done, and that was way more scary than what the kids thought. So, but just learning that was from a
Right.
child's standpoint, I don't want, that is so embarrassing that every single other person has got up and walked out of this exam. There was a 3-hour exam, by the way, and I was stuck for an extra 45 minutes without being able to concentrate in the first place, and now 40 people have just left, so I was
and they've all said how easy the exam was
Yeah.
as they're walking out.
But I'm having a hard time finding words because it is such a powerful thing. Me as a parent, I fight for that because I know that my child needs that, and then I can't consider the stigma that he's potentially feeling when I'm fighting for it.
And she was, listen, I'll tell you, that was my mom and me, and she was right.
But there's so much about the self-esteem that we really
but it's where they do it. What if
Correct.
I took my exam in a different room and no one would have known? So it's not that I didn't need the extra time.
Absolutely.
It was more I didn't need the stigma attached with it.
Correct.
So potentially it's not that
It's
you
so
shouldn't fight
powerful.
for the extra time, but maybe you need to fight for, they need to do it in a different room,
And
because
why aren't you
also
using it?
if you can't concentrate, how is everyone leaving a test helping you concentrate? Because
Right.
I was distracted every time anyone stood up and left. So it's not that, yes, I think it's something a parent should consider, but then that's not another problem. You need to find that solution. Actually, I want my child to do it this way.
And another way that we've been advocating is because a lot of times they're like, do I need an IEP? Well, let's start with even, let us come in, especially when a child transfers to another school, let us come in and tell them about your child and what's worked and what hasn't worked in the classroom, and just giving them not just a cheat sheet, but just showing them, this is why we thought this child would be great for your school, and here's what's worked for us, and where
And
are
building
you
those
willing?
relationship so they can phone, they'll
Oh, they
phone us,
call,
they'll say,
yes.
hey, what's this?
So I'm interested in where you've dialogued with public schools specifically, how receptive you feel they are to that.
We will be honest.
That's why we mainly go private.
Yeah. I'm
That's
trying
why
to
I'm
even
asking
think-
the question.
Yeah, and it's a reality that
Right.
unfortunately it is something where if we have a child going, I'm trying to think. Sorry.
Sorry.
And it's in a separate situation, not in the school situation that I'm thinking of, but yeah, it is mostly with private schools, and that's where you have more the willingness of also and flexibility in time where they will take a step back and call and ask.
Right.
But where I have had public schools phone me and ask has been where the parents have really demanded it.
Okay.
So it's really understanding that the parents need to ask for it. And I have had people phone me from Spring Branch, actually. We've spent most of our time working with HISD. So, and their teams. So it is harder within the public school, but where we find people are successful and we do get people phoning and asking, it's where the parents really demanded it.
Yeah. Well, and HISD is the recent recipient of one of the dyslexia grants across the state, and they're actually, from what it seems, they're actually really trying to step up and do a great deal.
The
for
teams
the
I've been
dyslexia
working with have
community.
been very helpful when
Yeah.
I go in, but it's more done on the testing side
Right.
from the transition side. And we've gone into some really great schools. I've met some great people within those team meetings who
Well,
are
they've just
phenomenal.
hired 30-something dyslexia specialists that they're putting through the NIHouse program, and
Yes,
they're paying
and-
for
yeah.
it and giving them the opportunity to do the practicum hours so that they can come out and get the dyslexia certifications on the other side. So that's just...
And
I
the
know-
reason,
Well, my NIHouse tutor is one of them, so she's so excited about that.
and what we also reason why we talk a lot about private schools is the models that have been set up in some of the high schools of having a learning center,
Yeah.
and that they're becoming more. They're understanding that they're missing out very much on a great population, that providing some accommodations or altering some curriculum or scheduling is allowing them to see, wow, these are great students, they're capable, and the investment that they're putting in some of these learning centers at these high schools and the way they've worked with a lot of our students has been absolutely amazing. And that's why also we've decided there's such amazing high schools that after 8th grade, we want to make sure that they are exposed to what a high school that is established can provide them.
Well, I'm going to kind of end us here.
That's okay.
'Cause-
And I know you have to go,
Yeah.
but there was one thing, because you had the question about
Yes.
Spanish.
Yes, I did.
And I know that's important.
yeah.
And I'll really quickly address it.
Okay.
We are going to offer Spanish for our kids. We think it's very important that children are exposed to that second language. But it is a conversation between parent and teacher as to whether or not the child needs an extra study hall instead. For the younger kids, it's going to be pretty much every day, like 10, 15 minutes. And it's going to be like, so again, when they get to high school and they're offered that chance for a second language, they can at least say, no, that did not work for me, or yes, it does. So again, it's giving them that opportunity to say, because there are some kids with dyslexia who are perfectly fine learning a second language, and there are some who cannot. And so it's giving them that safe space where they're not going to be teased for not knowing it.
Right.
So
well,
that's
it's so
why-
difficult when they already have to learn all the rules of the English
Yes.
language that then have to turn around and learn the rules of another
Right.
language. You know, when their comprehension struggles in English, how can you possibly expect them to
Completely agree.
to learn another language? Which is why it's so powerful to have ASL, American
Yes.
Sign Language,
Yes.
offered as a foreign language alternative within our
Yes.
public school system.
Absolutely.
So
And we actually have someone who has offered to teach that. So we're going to kind of see
wow.
where we go next year. But at the moment, we want to make sure that they have that opportunity. And so many of our kids, they want to learn a second language and they're so upset that that's not something they're able to do. So it's giving them that opportunity. But again, you know, if this is not something they can do, understanding, hey, I need that extra study hall, and this can be a time where I can make up some of this work, but no one knows about it because you're going to a different class. They don't necessarily realize someone isn't there.
well, and two, they can learn it from a conversational
Yeah.
perspective, but potentially never learn to
And that's
read it.
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing stopping them from. I mean, take Michael Phelps for example. You know, he studied Mandarin before he went to the Olympic Games in China, but he learned it through Rosetta Stone because being dyslexic himself,
Yeah.
he can't read it, but he could learn to operate from
Absolutely.
a conversational perspective, and that was, you know, that's such a powerful example to the community itself. So.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure.
Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate this.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you so much.
I hope y'all get lots of students because it sounds like a wonderful opportunity.
No, we're really excited about this school, and you can kind of feel the energy and the excitement
You definitely
from the
can.
community, which I think is so great.
I want to come here. Can I be a student?
Be a student.
All right. Thank you guys.
Have a good